G'day and welcome to another episode of Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann. And today we're back with Bryce Holdaway, where we're talking about his Armchair Guide to Property Investing Success. And in this episode, this is the juicier part. Part one, we laid some good foundations. We spoke about money management and why investors get stuck. And we went into Bryce's journey. In part two today, we're going through some of the models and frameworks that makes investors successful. And we're also going to be going through the age-old question of how to decide where to focus, either on cash flow or on capital growth. And Bryce has also got some great models and ways of thinking about making this decision. So I'm excited to have you listen to this part two. Let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialists servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here is your host, Jared Mann.
So you've also got some other really great models in the book. And of course, we don't have time to go through them all, and people can grab the book and spend many hours going through those. But tell us about the 5-step process, I guess, you go through with clients to arrive at the right properties, because anyone can use that for themselves.
Yeah. So we think that investing in property is a process, not an event, and most people treat it like an event. So what I mean by that is someone says, we have the Great Australian Barbecue topic where someone says, you should buy an investment property. What do they do first? They go straight to realestate.com.au or they go to domain.com or whatever their portal of choice is and start looking at property. And it's like, no, that's step 4. There's 3 steps prior to that. So the first step is to clarify. And that's essentially doing a little bit of what we just talked about. Let's take a snapshot of where you actually are right now. What are your assets? What are your liabilities? How much equity do you have? What's your income? What are your expenses? How much surplus do you have? That's really, really important that we know that, because that's actually going to form a decision around what we're actually buying and what you're actually doing this for. The second step is to evaluate. So now that we know where you're at currently, we've got to be able to put some thought into where we want to go. So am I 30 years of age? Am I 40 or am I 60? What level of risk profile do I have? Am I someone who at 30 is willing to bet the farm, or someone who's 57 who's thinking, I've got no chance to return if I stuff it up, right? So we need to be evaluating you based on your own unique individual circumstances to see what you should do. This is the biggest criticism I had of the property investment space back in 2016 when we wrote the book, Jared, is everyone just said, definitely, you've got an income. Why don't you come and buy this property over here on a shiny brochure? And it just wasn't taking into account everyone's unique circumstances. So the third step is to plan. So clearly, if you go to any of those offices in Perth where they have Woodside or any of those big mining companies, I promise you not a single one of those companies is opening a new mine, planning a new project without having a fully costed plan. They know what the trucks are going to cost. They know what the diggers are going to cost. They know what the revenues. They have a very, very detailed plan of what's going to happen. Why would we do it any different? Why would we do the back of a napkin? So we need to think about, do I want to renovate?
Some people plan for buying their TV more than they do their
wedding, plan their holiday, all that sort of stuff, but they don't do that. So, but we need to plan the things that happen, Jared. As you know, we don't buy investment properties in a little vacuum in isolation, not thinking about anything else. We've got to send the kids to public or private school. We've got to upgrade the car every 10 years. We've had this dream reno for this kitchen we've wanted to do for so long. My kids are 5 years away from getting married. I'm probably going to have to chip something of that in. Hey, I want to take a sabbatical in 2 years' time and take a whole year off. Like stuff that happens in real life, we need a plan for it. So it's not just saying, hey, what are we crunching the numbers on for the investment property? That's actually relatively straightforward. It's actually looking around the corner to see what my life is like so I can actually design a life that I want to be a part of, as well as plan for the future to self-fund, right? So step number 3 is the plan. Step number 4 is the implement. This is the doing. This is the bit where everyone starts. This is the realestate.com. This is the bit where you go and look at properties. This is where you go and try and buy something. And there's a whole topic in that. And then step number 5 is review. I think it's best described that when they launch a rocket to go to the moon, it's on track about 3% of the time. And then 97% of its time, little corrections are being made all the way to get to the destination. So if they left that rocket untouched, it wouldn't end up where they need it to be. And I make the sort of analogy from Perth is if I set sail from Fremantle Harbour there and I'm headed to South Africa, but I'm out by a couple of degrees, I'll probably end up at the top of Africa once I get to my destination. So we need to make these little adjustments along the way to make sure that we are still on track to where we are heading. And so that's why the review is really important, because stuff happens, life happens. Mate, the best of intentions, we do overspend, or we might underspend, or we might get a pay rise that we weren't planning for. There's stuff that happens. And so you're just continually repeating that cycle of clarifying, evaluating, planning, implementing, and then managing.
Awesome. Yeah, it just being an engineer in my past life, and we also have a lot of clients as engineers. I love systems, love processes. So that's probably why I love your book so much.
Well, mate, that's how my mind works. I've just got this one big mental mind map, drives my wife mad because I mind map everything. But I need to know very quickly, how quickly can I get to 30,000 feet to understand what I'm doing? Well, if you have those five steps that help you. By the way, it's the same 5 steps you do if you go to the doctor. Step into the doctor's office. Number 1, clarify. What's going on for you? Number 2 is evaluate. Let me think about, your age, your weight profile. Number 3, okay, here's my plan. This is what I need you to do. Number 4 is implement. Okay, go home and do it. Number 5, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time and we'll review and see what happened. Same deal if I go to the doctor that's buying an investment property, but most people don't do it.
Good one. And when it comes to the step 4 of your implementation, you guys have got a buyer's decision quadrant that I found really great as well. So take us through a bit on how that works and how it can help people.
I spent most of my professional life helping investors buy properties as a buyer's agent, but on Location Australia, the television show I did on Foxtel, and Escape from the City, it was for people who were buying it for their own home, so owner-occupiers. And what we do know is that at any point we are going to have to bring up the C word. We will have to compromise at some point. And if you know in advance what you're going to compromise on, it helps a lot.
Good one.
So I usually say to folks,
especially not in those moments when we're in
heightened emotions.
High emotions. And how can you decide what's important then?
Bang on, because location might be really important, and then you take them to a spot that is well out of their dream location, but there's an emotional response to a character home that one person just falls in love with, and then they throw everything out the window. And then it's not until later that you sort of digest it. So the buyer's decision quadrant is just essentially saying there are 4 areas that you will compromise on. 99 out of 100 buyers will compromise on one of these 4 areas. And the 1 out of 100 is someone who's won the lotto and they can just throw money at the problem, right? First one is price. Second one is location. Third one is size of the land. And fourth one is quality of the dwelling. So typically price is the least flexible for most people because most of us got a mortgage and it's a derivative of our income and how comfortable we are. So that's generally
budget and often
most of us don't have an inheritance that we can draw on or a lotto win that we can draw on. So that is usually the least flexible when it comes to compromising. So the next spot is location, right? So they call it location for a reason, but some people need to have some flex on that if they want to serve the other 3. Then the third one is the size of the land, right? So if your price is fixed and your location is fixed, you may have to compromise on the land size. You might want to live in Mount Hawthorn, for example, and you want a house, but you know better than me, Jared, that houses in Mount Hawthorn are pretty expensive. But if I don't want to budge from Mount Hawthorn and I've got a fixed budget, I've got to think, well, maybe I need to buy a townhouse or a unit or an apartment. So the land size is actually getting smaller and smaller to allow me to serve the top 2 quadrants. Quadrant 1 is price, quadrant 2 is location. I've got to compromise on the land. Or let's say I go to Mount Hawthorn and I can't budge on price, number 1. I can't budge on location because I absolutely need to live in Mount Hawthorn, and I will only buy a house. I will not buy a townhouse or anything smaller. It must be a house. Well, then you go to quadrant number 4, which is the quality of the dwelling. And you might want to live in one of those beautiful period homes in Mount Hawthorn, but you can't afford it. You won't move location and you won't budge on the size of the land. So instead, you get an old renovator or you get a non-period home.
Yeah.
Something that is just...
Might be a 1980 or 1970 built, but it's pretty standard.
Standard stuff, right? That doesn't have that emotional appeal, but you could turn it into something pretty special because you're a chippy or you're a painter or you've got some form of trade where you can actually add value. So in Mount Hawthorn, price, not budging, location, we're not budging. I definitely want some land. Well, then we will compromise on the quality of the dwelling or any combination of those 4 to arrive at it. So if you know in advance what it is, I usually say if there's 2 or more people involved in a decision, have that conversation before you come and see me on a television show, because if you start arguing in front of each other, the producers start rubbing their hands together and they go, this makes for amazing television.
This makes it less TV.
It absolutely does. So, yeah, that's the buyer's decision quadrant.
Excellent. Now, I wish I overlaid that. I recorded an episode a few back on my ultimate kind of criteria for top performing properties. And I've chatted to a few people since saying, Jared, that's all well and good if you have the money or you can get into those suburbs. But where I was going to is like some of these, you can choose what to compromise. Like you're never going to be able to overlay this criteria and achieve everything, but some things are more important than others, like being next to the water treatment plant. You don't want to compromise that regardless of any of the above. So there's definitely aspects that are more important than others, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And your engineering mind loves that, right? Because then you go, well, it's just 4 pieces of the chessboard that I've got to move. Which one am I going to move? And
simplify it.
Makes it simple. Yeah.
So I had to ask you this question because there's this kind of ongoing debate that was always raging in the forums and the Facebook groups, and it can be confusing for investors. So should someone focus on cash flow or focus on capital growth? And where does one start when deciding between the two? And is it one or the other?
I may disappoint you, but it's both. And all things being equal, chase growth first. But not everyone can do that. Some people just do not have the resource. They might not have equity in their home. They might have a low income, but they just are as determined as you and me to self-fund their retirement. So why should they be wrong if they chase income? So I'm not going to make them wrong. All I'm going to say is all things being equal, you want to chase growth first, because my plan is really simple. I want you to create a life that you don't want to escape from. And the way that you do that is you create a passive income. That means you no longer have to trade your time for money. That's the simple plan, right? Yeah. And if that's the simple plan, and we agree, you've quoted the book says $2,000 a week, but what if it's $1,000 a week? What if it's $3,000, right? We've got to actually know what it is that we're going towards. So let's just call it 2,000 and then reverse engineer what that looks like. Now, it's pretty simple. Usually the first 2 properties require growth, because we need the asset base to continue to grow at a level that allows us to fund the last 3. So if the first 2 are growth, we then buy a third asset, and we're talking textbook here and everyone's different, right? Yeah. But just to get the concept, the third property would be a balanced asset, which means we drop a little bit on our growth expectation, but we lift our yield expectation. So it's getting a bit further out from the main hub. So it's not going to be as in high demand, but we are starting to attract a rental base who might not be able to afford, so they pay a little bit more rent, and so we find the equilibrium. And the reason we do that is because we actually want to retire out the debt on the portfolio in total if we can. Because the last 2 properties, you want them to be income properties. Because if they're doing the heavy lifting for income and the first 2 are doing heavy lifting for the growth and the one in the middle is sort of balancing it out, ideally you will grow your asset base high enough that you can get the passive income you want, and you'll have enough income in the portfolio to pay it off. So if you think about it, if you have outside of the family home, $2.5 million worth of income producing assets fully paid off today, paying you 4% yield, that's $100,000, right? That's your passive income of $2,000 a week. It's just under $2,000 a week. So that's the goal. So I'm very, very clear on what we're trying to do in the first place, because remember, it's a process, not an event. And then we just build assets to do it, to fulfill that. Now, that's textbook. So the reason I say both is because some people just can't do that, mate. Like some people might get into the game like you and I did young, right? I bought my first investment property in 1999. I was 24, but I didn't have much equity. I didn't at all. I was just...
Put it this way, the properties that I bought then and the properties that I'm buying now are completely different.
What I did different.
That's why I relate to people on all parts of their journey, and I don't just say go out and buy something blue chip, because how does someone even get to that point? Yeah, so, and it's harder to buy blue chip now, right? If you go back to, I'm at 353 episodes on the podcast. Back in the first 20, I was, back when we started it back in 2016, only buy close to the capital cities, make sure you get mate, the landscape's changed so much since then that it's very hard for people to buy in the capital cities. We've just had this enormous boom all across the country. So people will need to flex and pivot and do the best that they can with what they've got. So I wouldn't start with income first if I had the opportunity to chase growth first. But if I didn't have the opportunity to chase growth first, I would chase income first. And hopefully that answers your question, because all things being equal, capital growth is what you get out of the market and rent is what keeps you in the market. But sometimes you have to be flexible based on your circumstances. And I like the sequencing of how you laid out those 5 as well, because early on you're trying to grow your asset base and you don't necessarily need your income to be replaced yet. Correct. Is the way I see it. And you're using the tax system to help fund it. Exactly. While you've got that higher income to use. And then later, as you get closer to retirement or that age where you want to have financial security, as in the choice to retire, then you start shifting and moving more towards the income focus. And that's, nice sequence to things, just makes perfect sense. And I guess one of the other things is know your number. So do you know how we were talking about cash flow before? Because someone says, well, he's talking about $2,000 a week. How do I know what my number is? I earn X amount of dollars now, but when I retire, I actually want to live on more than I have now. And that's where I challenge people to really unpack what that means, because so you got four general, and your engineering mind will love this. So you got 4 general categories of expenses in your life. First category is bills and spending. Bills and payments, right? So stuff that there's no discretionary spend on at all. That's the utilities and stuff just to get you through life. The next is discretionary spend. The third category is loan payments, typically your mortgage, but quite often it'll be a car payment and maybe a boat payment or whatever. And then the final category is investment expenses. And for a lot of people, they just don't have that category. Now, the important thing to remember is if you know how much you spend on your bills and payments and how much you spend on your discretionary spend, let's say that comes to $70,000. If you were to get $70,000 passive income in retirement, you'd live on exactly what you are now, even though your income's higher. Because typically by the time you retire, you've paid off your mortgage. That's the goal, right? And you've paid off your car and you've paid off your boat and you've paid off that holiday that you put on a credit card, all that sort of stuff. So you've got no loan payments left. And if you've set up your investment property correctly, it's now self-funding, where the rent covers all of the expenses in the property. And on top, it's providing you with $1,000 a week or $2,000 a week, whichever you do. So, and you're likely to have some super and, super, absolutely. Potentially other assets, Correct. So you have your home paid off. You'll have an investment property portfolio that you've got self-funded with a passive income, and you've got super and all the other assets you've talked about. So therefore, people can actually be often surprised at how little they need to fund a lifestyle that they don't want to escape from. That's actually less than what they're earning now. And once you get your head around that, that's why you start to take some of the mystery out of this. That's why I'm saying 3 to 5 investment properties is all you need. Don't get seduced by the magazines that say do 10 properties in 5 minutes and I flip them all sideways. If you can create value through property, trust me, I'm pro that. But for the majority of people, they don't have the appetite for it. So 3 to 5 investment properties over a career that you methodically
with an engineering mind, start to work down the debt so that you're left with knowing exactly how to spend your money, what you spend it on, and you've eliminated the other expenses. Mate, it's so incredibly straightforward. The only way that people get in this fall down is between the ears, because we just got a whole bunch of beliefs that get in the way.
Yeah. And I've certainly had to rewire a lot of mine, and you notice your patterns to how you make decisions, and you've just got to analyze, is this still serving me? So
start by having a chat with your parents and ask them about what was money like over the dinner table for them. And you'll start to see, they'll start saying stuff like money didn't grow on trees.
Oh, that was our family's one. So
yeah. And money is dirty, and money's hard to come by.
Yes,
and
that's my other classic of you have to work really, really hard for money. And so I'm kind of, despite having the money now, I keep working hard because it's so ingrained in me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I shouldn't talk about my problems at the other end of the spectrum, but you always have challenges throughout the whole journey, right? So,
well, you've summed it up beautifully, Jared. You run a business. You're in a position where you've leveraged your time to the point where you get paid for the energy and effort that you put into the business, but you also get paid an income from the business.
Yep.
And if you don't get your mindset right around that, easy come, easy go is another one. So, so there are some core fundamental beliefs that we have around money that is important. And if you imagine a tree, you'll like this. If you imagine a tree and the root system is your beliefs, the trunk is your internal attitude, the soil is your external influences, and then the branches and the trees are the knowledge and action. And what happens is when we water the tree, we usually just go and water at the base and the roots. So we water the roots because it doesn't make sense for us to stand with the hose and just point it to the top of the tree and water the leaves and the branches at the top. But in life, that's exactly what we do. We actually do the knowledge and the action. Go and read my book. It'll tell you exactly how to do it.
And then why is someone still being held back?
Mate, I've built that many plans for clients where they derail 3 years later, 5 years later, 7 years later. And I go, how did that even happen? It's because the soil was the external influences. They might not be hanging out with the right people, or the internal belief, the trunk wasn't strong enough. They were a bit too flexible. Or what's really going on, you think about an oak tree, how far the root system goes on an oak tree. If you do not put energy, time, and effort into those roots, i.e. your internal beliefs, the tree falls over, it dies. You don't water the branches and the leaves, you water the roots. But in our own life, Jared, we tend to water the branches and the leaves.
Yeah, awesome. I love all your metaphors, all your frameworks, and all your models. So I know we could chat forever, but thank you so much for making the time today, because I know how busy you are as well and how many clients you're helping. So I'm sure our listeners will have got a lot of benefit.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Jared.
Hopefully I can convince you to come back on sometime in the future and we'll dig a bit deeper. So,
mate, we're Perth boys. We look after each other. I'd love to come back on. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Jared.
Awesome, mate. And if our listeners want help with their investing, especially on the east coast of Australia, where should they go? I know your business is Empower Wealth.
Business is called Empower Wealth, but I reckon they should go and because your listeners probably enjoy podcasts. So I reckon if they go to thepropertycouch.com.au, they can go and check out some of the episodes we have on the podcast there.
I'm a regular listener there too, so it keeps me up on things.
Terrific.
My daily.
That's the best place to go, I reckon.
Thanks for your time, Bryce.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.